let's talk about Munster Leinster. Sorry. So this is like covered quite a bit in the newspapers today. Ethan Asewa and Johnny Sexton and Ronald O'Gara, rather, were out doing press yesterday. So they're covered in a lot of the newspapers this morning. A couple of interesting things in the Nasewa comments, talking about RG Snyman. He says, makes a slight comparison, a sort of oblique comparison between himself and Brad Thorne. And he says he's a specimen, there's no doubt about it. When you have someone who has speed to go along with that, and probably a different skill set from the rest, and that's what lifts and will continue to lift the Munster forwards to a new level. Certain individuals have that physique, the change that they can make to the attitude around them. It's no different to Brad Thorne and the influence he had throughout all the different clubs around the world. So all I'm hearing here is that after Leinster managed to pluck the best talents from around the world to win their Heineken Cup with Brad Thorne in tow, Munster are merely following the model of looking outside their own province to bring in great international stars like RG Snyman and Damien de Allende. And I'm sure that is striking fear into the heart of every Leinster supporter around Ireland, Ger.
Brad Thorne basically had like a Zlatan-style career where everywhere he went, league titles and European Cups followed and World Cups in different codes. So that's very high praise from somebody who obviously witnessed firsthand the material impact somebody like Brad Thorne can have. And I think, you know, this is Ozymandias. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. I am king of kings. The rest of the world are genuinely worried about what's going to emerge from Munster as the chrysalis unfurls. What colour? Well, it's obviously a giant red butterfly, but is it a red moth coming bringing death? Does the moth signify death for the rest of Europe, Owen? Yes, it does. Because right now expectations among Munster fans should not be any higher than being the best team in Europe. Look at the quality of the coaching ticket that they put together. Look at the massive investment that they've made in 2 World Cup winners. Look at the finally largely fit squad they have, with the exception obviously of I think Ty Burns is out for the rest of the season. And yeah, obviously we still wait to see Joey Carberry back, and you know, fingers crossed he's going to be back sooner rather than later. But like, you must be unbelievably excited to be a Munster Rugby fan at the moment. Like, what a team they've put together.
It's Galactico-esque in terms of what they've done in this imposed off-season. It's definitely going to be novel to see players of that quality going out and representing Munster over the next little while. That'll wear off after a little while, and you'll see kind of what level they actually settle at. And it'll probably be next season before you start to kind of appreciate what they can actually do for the club. And I guess what Van Gran and their connection is as well, because that's possibly why this has happened as well, why there has been a bit of a South African influence on Munster as well, that the coaching ticket has been based from that country now for the last 2 tickets that the coaching team has had. So I don't know, like, I'm not convinced that this is automatically going to be uber success, considering the gap between Munster and Leinster was fairly large. But I think Alan Quinlan has always made the point that the gap between Leinster and Munster has always been large, because 1 to 23 Leinster are just so much better than Munster, rather than 1 to 15. 1 to 15 you could nitpick a few positions here and there where Munster might make the edge. You see the Munster players who get caps for Ireland and who start for Ireland, but it's really when you look through the bench, that's when Leinster really have the jump on Munster, and they've been able to close out games so well, kill teams down the stretch. And I think that Leinster were possibly 20 points better than Munster before lockdown. I think they're now 8 points better than Munster, but on any given day, that's just over a 1-score game. And I think if Joey Carberry comes back and is still on the trajectory that we saw before his terrible run of injuries, I think that closes down to an even smaller gap, especially if Sexton goes the other way. But that brings us nicely on to Johnny Sexton, because Ethan Asewa has been talking about this imposed sabbatical that a lot of players have had to do this year. Asewa, of course, took some time out of the game, came back a new man after his own sabbatical, and he says you'd be able to get over niggles that you had. That's one of the points he made with the lockdown. There would still be enough time to get gains physically and mentally, even with all the distractions that were going on. It was the perfect time to refresh. I can see Johnny Sexton playing until he is 42 if he wanted. There might be a slight exaggeration in that quote, but maybe there's not. Maybe there is like a situation here where we see Johnny Sexton going for a long, long time here, and is still playing at a fairly decent level, a very decent level, and he is still the best out half in Ireland. In that world, that is a terrifying prospect for the Munster fan, because that, I think, does keep Munster at arm's length for a little while longer. Like he says,
7 more years of Johnny Sexton, according to Ethan.
that is,
That's a lot.
yeah, not bad. Like Nasewa says, he's spoken to players all over the world during the time, and he says, if I can get another year out of this, that's the way players who've been speaking to him, that's the things that they've been saying. He says someone like John Afoa, who's been putting his head in a scrum for 17 years, is feeling great and knows he can go for another year with ease. They just have to be conscious about hitting the ground running and managing that as soon as rugby kicks off again. So it's a good time to be in your twilight years in your rugby career, according to Ethan Nasewa.
Yeah, look, the restart of the rugby season, you're going to have some fairly serious injuries over the next couple of weeks because they haven't had full contact the way they're going to have in match situation. You started to see the pads started to go on in the NFL, and already there's a bunch of ACLs have been blown out in the first couple of training sessions. So this is, I think, what we saw with the Bundesliga and what we saw with the NRL when they came back. Now, it didn't seem to happen that much in English football, or as much as maybe they were a little bit later on. They got to witness some of the stuff, so you'd hope that there aren't too many serious injuries. But I hope he's right. Another 4 or 5 years of Johnny Sexton keeping the seat warm for whoever's coming next and driving standards wouldn't be the worst thing, would it?
No, it absolutely wouldn't. And like I guess it's still a question that needs to be answered from Leinster's perspective as well. When does Ross Byrne start making the step up where there is a proper challenge for that 10 jersey? Like I'm sure as a Leinster fan, you'll admit that there really has never been a proper battle since Carbery has left. Like Byrne has been excellent, and he has been composed, and he has definitely shown a cool head, probably beyond his years a little bit. But I don't think we've ever seriously got into a conversation where it's like Sexton's Leinster jersey and his position in that team is seriously under threat. That probably needs to start happening soon for Leinster. Even if Sexton does go to 42, there will likely be a drop off at some point.
It has to happen for Ireland first. Like it'll happen first for Ireland, and there's no sign of that happening. Like legitimately, no sign of that happening. So,
well, were we not having a Carbery Sexton debate? Like, was that not a serious thing, or are we saying that was all just kind of like kind of pointless arguments around the merits of Joey Carbery? Because I certainly felt that was a real debate
about who would actually start a big game.
It definitely felt that there was a conversation about how do we get Joey Carbery into the team.
Well, that's different. That's a completely different conversation.
I accept that, but
but that's he's not challenging him. That's the opposite of challenging him. That's like let's put him at full back, or can he play centre, or like that's literally Sexton is unassailable in this argument, and so therefore how do you get him in the team?
That's the conversation you're having before the Rugby World Cup. I think that conversation shifts a little bit now. Like that's the conversation where Sexton is the reigning world player of the year, and that's to do with the fact that nobody is going to take his jersey. But what's happened now is there's been an intervening 6 months where the form for Ireland as a whole, like all our top players really haven't exactly gone back to anywhere close to 2018 levels yet, and there have been conversations about who is usurping who. Now, of course, Carbery's been out, so we haven't been able to have that conversation around out half, but we've been having that conversation around pretty much every other position. Like my opinion would be that once Carbery comes back, and if he is back to the beast that he was before his slew of injuries, that conversation will then become a reality head to head. But the thing is that
when,
yeah, we don't know when that'll be. But it's not necessarily kind of a black mark against Carbery that the conversation was had at how do you get them both into the team. Like that could have been a black mark against Rob Kearney as much as anything else.
Yeah, it was. It was. That's the whole point. My point is that Johnny Sexton's position in the Ireland team is unassailed and has been. And until somebody can kick him out of the Ireland team, there's no chance of him getting kicked out of the Leinster team. That's unassailable at this stage. And maybe Joey Carbery is the person to kick him out of the Ireland team, but he'll have to perform really well, and he'll have to put a body of work together where there's a month or 2 months or 3 months where he's showing up. The best ability is availability, and we just don't have that at the moment. So 15 minutes past 9 here this morning on OTB AM. I've got to tell you what's on the OTB Sports app. Always very busy. It's your choice what the featured stories are on the feed. You get to select which sports you're interested in, and that's your home feed. You can scroll down and then you see the latest podcasts that are available for you there. You can also just have a one-click radio button at the bottom of the button at the bottom that says radio is OTB Sports Radio, and it's there 24 hours a day, uninterrupted stream of all of our content, including this show live, the evening show live, and all of our best stuff in between as well. Our podcast network is absolutely huge, 40 different podcasts updated at different intervals over the course of the month. All our videos are there. You can watch this show live, or you can look back at any of the stuff that we've done as well. And the best place to subscribe to our podcast is on the OTB Sports app. Loads of you are using it as your podcast player of choice at the moment, and we're getting really good feedback on that as well. So please download the app, rate it, share it, tell your mates,